What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we're out in the garden today. It's not quite as warm as it's been the past few days, but hey, as long as there's no snow on the ground, I can't really complain. I'm having a great day, and hopefully you guys are as well. In today's episode, we're going to be showing you all how to grow elderberry cuttings. Now, we listed these for sale on our website a few days ago, and a lot of you have picked them up, which I thank you for. And a lot of you also wanted to know how to grow them. And so despite the fact that we only had a limited supply, I figured I'd throw this video up for everybody to watch, not just, for those that supported the store and bought the cuttings, which I appreciate, but for those that might have a friend or a family member, or maybe even in your own yard, you've got an elderberry tree and you want to grow more of them. Because these are actually really easy to grow from cuttings. As you can see, they're already growing as it is. Now, the best time to take a cutting is in early season before they break dormancy. These have broken dormancy, but only because we've been soaking them in water, which we'll get to. But you want to get a cutting that's at least 5 to 7 inches tall. But the main thing is not necessarily how tall it is. That just helps you get a little bit more root, kind of root action on the cutting. But also, you want to make sure that you have at least one leafing joint. Now, you'll see a leafing joint as, well, a joint that has leaves. It's very simple to identify. And you want at least one of those. 2 is great, but 1 is all you need to get them to grow. And then basically, the next thing you're going to do is before they actually start leafing out like this, you're going to do this, I can't necessarily say when you would do this, because here in Michigan, it's going to be a little bit different than other places. But for us, it's about 3 to 5 weeks before your last frost date. That's kind of when you want to take these cuttings. They're going to just barely be breaking bud, and you want to stick them in some water. You want to stick them in some water for about, I would say, 5 to 7 days, changing the water out every single day. It is very important that you do that, otherwise you'll start to get algae and mold, and that ends up killing the root production. So you want to keep them in the water for about 5 to 7 days, and then it's very important that you take them out of the water and place them in a damp potting mix. I've got some here, some damp potting mix. And the potting mix that you choose should be a pH balanced potting mix. It should not be too acidic or too alkaline. Elderberries do prefer a slightly acidic soil, but root development actually does not do very well under acidic conditions. And so it's very important that when you're trying to grow these new cuttings, that you go with just a pH balanced potting mix, which I've got. I also have added 1 part sand to the potting mix. This is critical for one thing, and that's that you want the potting mix to drain very well. Now, you want to regularly water it. Yes, you want to keep them damp, which we'll talk about more as we get later on in this episode, but you want to regularly water your plants, but you don't want your potting mix to hold on to too much water, otherwise these new teeny tiny baby roots will rot. You'll notice that as you're soaking them in the water, they'll get kind of some white little bumps, and those are immature little roots. Now, when you go to plant them, those roots will take some time to kind of acclimate to the soil. They won't just take right away. And so they will take anywhere from 1 to 2 months to get fully rooted. So don't panic if you don't see any new growth. I do have an added, I did add to this potting mix an all-purpose organic fertilizer. We use Trifecta Plus. That's what we use on all of our plants. And so, forgive me, by the way, it's freezing cold today. So my lips aren't quite working the way they would normally work. Neither are my fingers. Everything's like oil can. I feel like the Tin Man in the Wizard of Oz. I'm like cold weather. Now, a lot of people want to get antsy and they want to get their pots and they want to plant their plants and they want to, pick them up and check the roots and pick them up and check the roots and stick them back and check them, check on them every week. Don't do that. It is the easiest way to break off tender roots and end up killing your cutting. Now, these cuttings will not have 100% success rate. If you do, great, that's awesome. But the general take rate being how many actually will set roots and take, the take rate on these is going to be roughly 60 to 65%. So fairly low, but that's why you need this video to give you all the information that you can so that you have good success. Now, when it comes to containers, which one do you go with? Do you go with a shorter one, like here? or do you go with a taller one like here? And the answer is really how often you can water, the level of care that you can give your cuttings, because this will work, absolutely, but it's gonna dry out a whole lot faster, and you cannot allow these to dry out. They need to stay damp their entire time. Now, we're not talking soaking wet, but I'm talking damp. Like if you look at my soil here, this is damp. This is damp. If I crumble it, it will form a little clod, and it will actually kind of hold its shape. It is damp. It has a noticeable dampness to it. It's not light gray. It's not very lightweight. It has moisture in it, and you want it to stay like that the entire time. Otherwise, your cuttings will not take. Now, the next thing that I was going to say with the size of container to consider is the size of cutting. If you have a really tall cutting like this in a really short container like this, there's very little stem for the, there's very little stem to set down roots, because that's what you're rooting, is the stem of the cutting. And so in a container like this, you're going to be getting about 3 inches of a total of like 8 or 9 inches of your cutting. And that's okay, but when you could put it in a container like this and root, 5 to 7 inches of your 8 to 10 inch cutting, that's fantastic. Now, this is just an abnormally large cutting, I get it, but you want to take that into consideration because you may have a larger cutting and sometimes this just does not cut it. Now, there's a second way that you can root your cuttings, and it's something that I've seen a lot of people do, but it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of maintenance. And that is with what's called lay down rooting. And this is basically the process of laying your cuttings on an angle, just like this. You rest them on the side of the pot, and you basically pack the soil around the stems, just like that. Now, this is a holeless seed tray, so it's going to hold on to water. I suggest drilling holes. Don't use, this is just for an example because I didn't have one on me, but drill some holes through here to drain the water. Very important. But this is going to have a relatively shallow surface, and they're going to set down roots. And then once they root, you are going to have to pull them up and then transplant them. But the nice thing is that you get really good surface area, which is awesome for setting down roots. And you can also use a humidity dome on the outside. So the leaves are on the outside. The part that's getting, that's trying to be rooted is on the inside of the humidity dome. And so because they're on the perimeter, the leaves won't mold, but the humidity will help the roots form. It's really, really cool. You can also take saran wrap and wrap it up if you want. But the nice thing with this is that you could, if you had like 30, 40 cuttings, you could wrap this entire tray with them. And it's a great way to do it. In fact, that's how we did it at the commercial greenhouse I worked at. So this is one very awesome way to do it, just one way. So there is that. And then I'm gonna give you the way that a lot of people do it, which is just to fill up your pot, stick your cutting in, just like that, and then just keep this damp. Now, you want to keep this out of strong direct sunlight. The reason why is because the strong direct sunlight will start to burn some of these tender leaves, and you are relying on the leaves to generate some energy because that's what's going to help generate some roots. But it's recommended to keep them in kind of some filtered sunlight between 4 and 7 hours of sun, nothing really harsh and really direct. Now, the other final note to note is that once you start to see roots, it is really important that you don't leave these in their pots for a super long time, because these are a very fast rooting perennial. These will grow roots super fast. And when that happens, they'll get root bound very quickly. And so once you start to see roots coming out the bottom, don't wait. You don't need to like leave them in here for a year or two. If this was like a maple seedling, you could probably leave it in for like a year or two. But with these grow very fast. And so because of that, you want to make sure that as soon as you see the roots coming out the bottom holes there, don't pick it up and set it in and pick it up and set it in. That's going to end up killing your cutting. That's going to break off those tender roots. Just wait, be patient. And when you start to see roots starting to come out the bottom, that's when you pop it out and transplant it into its final location. And yeah, super easy to grow. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. As always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel reminding you to grow big or go home. And as always, we'll catch you all later. See ya.